Hello, I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady and welcome to this video series which is all about teaching primary maths in the 2021-22 academic year, especially to the classes that are facing the most challenges post-lockdown. This is the final video in the series which is all about teaching children who are 10 to 11 years old, which is year 6 in England, it's P7 in Scotland and it's 5th grade in the USA, but in this video I'm going to refer to it as year 6. In this video, I'll give a brief description of what's going on in the schools that are facing the worst challenges and why things are as they are. I'll talk about how we can use targeted starter activities, short activities at the beginning of the day or at a time that suits you to target gaps and fill them effectively for the children who are struggling with gaps in their learning. I'll explain how you can teach the usual maths you would teach to this year group by using strategies that grip all children, even if they've got significant gaps in their learning, while we fill those gaps and will allow them all to understand the usual curriculum for this year by the end of the year. I'll make some suggestions as to how you can spend any money you might be able to grab from your budget just now if there's some going around. And then finally, I'll talk about preparing for the SATs exams, which are just in England. So if you're not in England, you can switch off at that stage and breathe a huge sigh of relief that you don't have to deal with those tests. So to briefly describe the challenges that some schools are facing, a lot of children missed a huge amount of school in years 4 and 5 over the last 18 months. And the biggest challenges lie in the communities where very few of those children were educated at home and most children were left to do their own thing. Typically in a class in a community like that, maybe 10 or 12 children were in school because their parents were working and teachers were able to do some brilliant work with those children. And then when the rest of the class came back, it was a complete nightmare because they had such huge gaps in their learning and there was this big gap between the children who'd been in school regularly and those who hadn't. And there were so many issues to address, issues of behaviour, really essential issues in reading and writing. And in a lot of schools, they've not yet even really begun to get on top of their maths. So it's going to be your job to get on top of it this year, and I'm here to help you all the way. I'll be live streaming at 9 o'clock every Sunday morning, and you can bring your trickiest problems to me, and I'll try and puzzle them out with you. But let's give you some strategies to get started with. So the first thing I'm suggesting is at the beginning of each day, you have a 10-minute maths targeted intervention and fluency starter activity, which you're going to use to blitz the gaps in students' learning. So where do we begin? Well, if you've got children who are seriously struggling with their maths, it's often the case that when they do calculations, if they're doing a smaller calculation within a bigger calculation, like 18 add 7, they're counting on or back, if they're subtracting, one at a time, instead of seeing that the 18 add 7 could be 18 add 2, takes you to 20, and then you've 5 left, so it's going to be 25. Now, if you've got any children left who are still counting on or back one at a time, you have to tackle that instantly at the beginning of this year. If you don't, they are going to be stuck with slower strategies for life that are going to become embedded, and it's pretty much impossible to change them later because secondary school teachers never go back to those things. So they need to be doing some of these worksheets on fast addition and subtraction, which show the structure for breaking the addition of the number into 2 steps. And they can do these with counting beads so they can see exactly what they're doing with the colour change and check their own answers and understand what it was that everyone else in the class could see when they were going more quickly than them and exactly what it is that they need to fix if they're going to fly at secondary school. So stick with these worksheets until they really get it. On all my worksheets, there are click-through links where you can go to versions of the worksheets that auto-generate more examples of the same worksheet with or without answers. And once they've got the hang of this, they need to be able to use that strategy of breaking numbers up to 10 into 2 parts to do bigger calculations in all sorts of circumstances. And you need to check that they're doing that and that they're not counting on or back one at a time anymore. And they absolutely can use their fingers to show the partitions of small numbers to help them if they need to do that. But they need to make that change. In the schools I've been working with, they teach that deliberately at the beginning of year 3 when children are 7. And all the teachers of older children are trained to spot it if children are not doing it, if they're not subordinating their partitioning, using their partitioning of small numbers to help them do calculations more quickly rather than counting on or back one at a time. So year 4, 5 and 6 teachers are all trained to spot it and intervene. And in those schools I've been working with, we don't seem to have children coming out with dyscalculia, and we're confident that that's one of the reasons why we've seen such a dramatic change. There are other reasons, but I think that's the biggest win that a lot of teachers don't see, and once they see it, it makes a real difference. Okay, beyond that, here's a worksheet I would recommend, more decimal calculations too. And these are decimal numbers to add, subtract, multiply and divide. And this worksheet is going to check that children can use their standard algorithms and apply them to decimal numbers. If they can't, it will help you identify exactly what it is they're struggling with. What is it they can and can't do? Of course, you can start them working in pairs or small groups on these so they can help each other out and check each other. So small faults are filled. But then if a child's got a real gap, if they really don't understand column addition or subtraction or multiplication or division, you can go back and puzzle out what is it they don't understand. If they really don't understand column multiplication, you could go back to a worksheet like this where it's all multiplication by 2. And here's a link to a video that explains how to teach this from scratch. Perhaps they can do this, but they can't multiply by 6, 7 or a particular number because they didn't properly learn that times table. So you could give them column multiplication by the number that they're struggling to multiply by, or division by the number that they're struggling with. And if you give them these worksheets, don't give them multiplication tables to help them. Give them apparatus like counting beads. So if they're struggling with their 7 times table and they're doing lots of multiplication by 7, they can lay these out to show 7 and the next 7. So 2 7s are 14. They can really see the structure of that. And when they add the next 7, it goes on as a 6 and a 1, and they can really see that. So that's 21. Or you could give them an array pack to help them. This is the array pack for multiplication by 6. So if we look at 6 times 8 here, you can actually see 6 rows of 8 squares, or 8 columns of 6 squares that you're counting them up to find the answer. And you can see how each result relates to each of the other results to help children find shortcuts, but still deeply understand what they're doing. Or it might be that they're struggling with the decimal numbers, in which case you need to go back and focus on deeply understanding decimal numbers. So gradually over time, you can target the work for each child so they're getting the exercise sheet that's exactly the right level for them so they can blitz and fill their gaps. And it's only 10 minutes. You can definitely get your children who are flying to help the children who are struggling. But of course, if you've got children who are flying with maths who are struggling in other areas of the curriculum, you might want to send them some work on a different subject while most of your children are doing maths. All my worksheets can be downloaded free from www.authenticmaths.co.uk, and you'll find there are lots of very visual worksheets. So if a child's struggling with column addition, with this worksheet, it's got the pictures so they can deeply see what's going on. They need to set up their own column addition and puzzle it out, and they can check their answer by counting the total. Another strategy you'll be able to use at this time of the day, this 10-minute slot later on in the year when you've introduced your children to some algebraic notation, is this worksheet here. You pick 2 numbers for A and B, and the video that explains this worksheet, I suggest that you pick 2 small positive whole numbers for this column, so you can check that children are understanding the notation you've just taught them, and the maths is very easy. But then for this column, you can pick fractions, decimal numbers, large numbers, and really challenge and stretch your children. Some of these they won't be able to do because they're not on the primary curriculum for those types of numbers. And it's quite nice to have a leveler where everybody's struggling. But again, it'll give them fluency practice and it will help you and them to identify and target their gaps. Another type of 10-minute activity that's really good is concept checking. Now you might have simple white worksheets that come with most schemes of work where question 1 is always one concept from the curriculum, question 2 is always the next concept, so you get questions on the same topics each day and it helps to identify topics you're struggling with that you've missed and fill them. A lovely way to do that is with these Propeller Rapid Recall whiteboards. This is the one for year 5. As a teacher, it asks you to shout a number between 30 and 99. Children write it in here. They may be working in groups at first before working on their own when they've built fluency with doing these tasks. They copy that number into all the orange circles and then answer all the questions for those circles. And there's different activities on the back which you can use on other days. This is the Year 5 board, which is a great place to start, but of course you can go back to earlier years and you can use the Year 6 board as soon as you're ready. So that's your 10-minute starter activities to build fluency and to intervene to target gaps in children's learning. Now, how do we teach these really tricky topics that are on the Year 6 curriculum if we're trying to teach them in situations where a lot of children in our class have many gaps in their learning that we haven't yet had time to target? Well, I've created this year planning document. It's very short, it's 1 term per page. So for example, this column is your 3rd half term, this is your 4th half term. There are codes which show you how every component of the Year 6 curriculum which accompanies it is covered. And this document links directly to worksheets that accompany it and also to videos that explain how to teach every topic if you're not sure. Now, working from a planning guide like this is much more effective and efficient than working from pre-prepared lesson by lesson guides, because you can adapt in response to what you see in front of you in your class. You're not using a pre-written detail scheme that's written for every possible situation known to man. And also because this particular scheme is deeply structural, and structural teaching is more effective and more efficient than other forms of teaching. So you teach children the structures behind their maths first, and then you add in specific procedures linking them back to the structures. It's like if you're moving to a new area, being taught the map of the area before you're taught specific routes through it. And when you're taught the routes through it, you link those routes into your map. So quite quickly, you develop a good map that you can use to deeply understand the situation for yourself and to puzzle out routes if you go wrong. So for example, if we're teaching percentages of amounts, the worksheet here, find 20% of 2,600, well, you've got your 20% bar, and above it you can see these different percentage bars that link to fractions. So you can knit together all the ways that children might do this. Some children might say, well, 1% is 26, so one of these tiny little bars is 26, and we need 20 of those, and that's fine. Others might say, well, 10 of these bars are 260, because 10 make 1/10, and I need 2 lots of 260. And all the questions on the sheets on percentages are structured in this way to help children understand each other when they're using different methods and deeply understand their own thinking and be supported to justify their own thinking. And the proportion bar is also used for the teaching of ratio. So for sharing 168 in the ratio 4:3, the proportion bar's already there. They can draw the line splitting off the 4 and the 3, and then they understand that they need to share the 168 into 7 equal parts, and then this share is 4 of them and the other share is 3 of them. And again, that's going to practice the multiplication and division. So I would leave that till later in the year when you're confident you've got your children all going with multiplication and division and you've filled those gaps, and then move on to this. So you're just focusing on their understanding of ratio and they're all ready for it. Now, please don't think that I disrespect some of the fantastic pre-written schemes of learning that are out there. If they're working for you, then absolutely do continue to use them. The point of this channel is just to help you stand outside of them and check that they're working for you and know how to innovate beyond them if they're not quite right for you and the class in front of you at this particular moment in time. The strategies that I share with you on this channel come from the work I've done over the last 8 years to capture what the best primary maths teachers in England know and do, and their deep understanding. I've been working with them to develop training that's had an incredibly powerful impact in the schools we've worked in. And now I'm sharing that on this YouTube channel because I don't want that understanding to be lost, because it seems to make such a positive difference to children's lives. So there's lots of great maths in this year of teaching. Really, we're moving on beyond the 4 operations to use those 4 operations to solve harder problems of long multiplication, long division. The 4 operations being used in the context of fractions, decimals, percentages, and ratios. And there's lots of great topics on shape, space, measure, and data. And I hope you're really going to enjoy your teaching. Right, let's look at some of the resources that you might want to buy if you can get your hands on a little bit of budget at this stage. Some of your children may still need counting beads to help them see their tables and their subordination of partitioning, which we've already discussed. And some may need arrow cards. These ones are just for whole numbers, but you can get them for decimals as well, and they really help the children who are struggling with dyslexia to understand numbers deeply. Dienes blocks are still incredibly valuable for teaching large numbers, for working on array, for factors and factor pairs and square numbers, and for building cuboids as we start to understand volume. Place value counters are still of tremendous value for some students. Some don't need them now because they're imagining them in their heads with deep fluency. Visualising fractions as circles is particularly important, and I recommend Pizza Fraction Fun. It's there as well, to make sure that every child is properly visualising their thirds and how different fractions relate to each other as they start to move on to pie charts. If they can't see fractions in circles and imagine them, they're going to be really stuck when we introduce pie charts. If you possibly can, get your hands on some magnetic Polydron. It is just so wonderful to see nets and absolutely understand the difference between surface area and volume. And of course, you can build volumes of cuboids with Dienes blocks. And if you haven't got your magnetic Polydron, they want to be making plenty of nets of three-dimensional shapes from squared paper so they can see the surface area of them on the squared paper on the net, and then fold them up and fill them with the Dienes blocks to see the volume. Because you're looking at centimetre squared paper, so it shows the surface area in square centimetres, and then you can fold it up and fill it with the Dienes ones, which are centimetre cubes. For the children who are flying, it's worth buying Gareth Metcalfe's IC Reasoning books. They're a very reasonably priced PDF download, and then of course there's the NRich site as well. Your children who are flying can get on working with a great deal of independence while you target and help the children who need more help from you. You just want to try and put aside a small amount of time each week so that the children who are flying and are working beyond the curriculum, can tell you what they've been doing, because that's of tremendous value to them. But of course, some of them might be working to fill gaps in other subjects on the primary curriculum. You will need plenty of squared paper this year, and you will probably also need an increased printing and photocopying budget as you work to personalise the work for children and adapt whatever resources you usually use to better target the gaps that children have. And finally, as I've said before, I'm recommending these packs of Propeller Rapid Recall whiteboards. They come with the pens and the whiteboard rubbers included. So I hope you're really going to enjoy your teaching this year. There are many huge challenges in front of you. I'll be here to help you all the way. I'll be live streaming every Sunday on this channel at 9 AM British time if you want to ask me questions live, or you can leave questions underneath these videos, or you can come and chat to me in my Facebook group, which is Expert Primary Maths Teaching. So that's it for many of you now. If you've liked this video, if you think it's useful, please do share my channel and the related videos with your friends and colleagues. There are now videos on how to teach every primary maths topic in age-appropriate ways. So for some of you, this video's over now, but if you're in England, we need to talk about Year 6 SATs. So absolutely everything that I've said so far understands and respects that Year 6 SATs are in place, and this year planning scheme is designed to fit around them and prepare children for them. But we need to face head on that these exams should not exist. In the 21st century, we need to assess what children can and can't do. And it's perfectly possible to do that with the technology that we have. Government could interact with that, regulators could interact with that, and we'd have a much wiser system if we had it. SATs exist purely for the benefit of politicians, so they can reduce children to a single number, and that allows them to adjust the boundaries of grading to show whatever improvement they want to show at national level. And it's going to be particularly toxic this year because the schools that are going to struggle most, as they always have been, but much more so just now, are those schools that operate in the communities where very few children have done any learning at home. SATs are under the complete control of the School Standards Minister, Nick Gibb, who gave us a primary maths curriculum that teaches everything much younger than anywhere else in the world on the grounds that he believed that age didn't matter. He personally got rid of apparatus from Key Stage 1 SATs, so while in international forums People are discussing, should we introduce column addition when children are 7 or 8? In England, of course, many children are assessed on it without apparatus when they're 6. He's personally introduced the tables check, which is carefully designed to force children to rote learn their tables rather than understand them, and could have been designed so much more wisely if he'd used evidence or the professional community to inform what he was doing. And he is not there as the Minister for School Standards to work in the interests of children or schools. He's there to work in the interests of the government, and he is controlling education to do that. So if your unions do stand up to SATs and suggest we shouldn't have them this year in particular because it'll be so divisive and so damaging to the schools that are facing the most challenges, then please do support your unions and boycott them if you possibly can. Do write to your MPs and explain all these issues if you have the time to do so. Thank you. But most of all, look after yourself. You're amazing. You've survived the last 2 years. You've got amazing children around you. Let's get out there and have a fabulous year where everybody learns masses. Take care. Bye for now.